I mean, you're sort of clued in to what your boss likes.
Mm-hmm.
You also have your own tastes. You kind of know what the project is supposed to be. I don't know. There's no formal executive school on how to give notes. That's why it's kind of a weird job because there's no training for it. I don't really necessarily know what makes you good or not good.
You're listening to Screenwriters Need to Hear This with Michael Jamin.
Hey everyone, it's Michael Jamin. Welcome to another episode of Screenwriters Need to Hear This. I got another great guest today. This is my old buddy, Steve Baldikoski. Steve has written on some of your favorite shows, as long as your favorite shows are.
As long as you have terrible taste and only watch shows that are gone after 13 episodes.
Then these are your favorite shows. But I'm going to start. In no particular order, although I think I'm going in order. Teen Angel, Working, remember that show? DAG with David Allen Greer. Baby Bob. Oh, we're going to talk about Baby Bob.
Okay, yeah.
AUSA. Andy Richter Controls the Universe. People like that show a lot. I'm with her, or I'm with her. I'm with her. I'm with her.
I'm with her.
I'm with her.
Yeah.
Eight Simple Rules. The New Adventures of Old Christine. That was a good show. The Jake Effect. Big Shots. True Jackson. I forgot you worked on that. Wilfred, which you could thank me for. Glenn Martin DDS, which you could thank me for. Kirsty, which I can thank you for. Last Man Standing. Whatever.
Which, like, yeah. I don't have anyone to thank for that.
No one should be thanked for that. Save Me. Jennifer Falls. Ned and Stacy. And then, of course, you were the executive producer and showrunner of Fuller House, the Full House remake. Steve, welcome to the big show.
Thank you for having me. It's very exciting to be here.
Wasn't it exciting? Man, oh man. Oh, and I have to say, so we started out, my partner and I hired Steve and his partner Brian on Glenn Martin DDS. And we were always very grateful. These guys turned in great drafts. And we were always extremely grateful.
Oh, thank you.
And then we would just shovel more work, and for gratitude, we would just shovel more scripts in your face. Write this one now.
That was one of the highlights of my career. That was some of the best times I've ever had.
We had some. It's funny. I asked Andy Gordon in a previous episode. I said, and I'll ask you the same question: if you could go back in time and either remake any of the shows you worked on, or like reboot it, or just work on it again, what would they be? Any?
I thought you were going to tell me Andy's answer.
Andy said, if you want, Andy said, just shoot me and True Jackson.
Glenn Martin was a highlight, and I think it was an underappreciated show.
Certainly was.
If it weren't in claymation, maybe someone would have watched it.
We went on the internet, Siebert and I, my partner and I, we went on the internet and we found some guy talking about Glenn Martin. And it was as if he was in the writer's room. It was as if he was, because he was right on the money. Like he knew what was good about it, what was bad about it. He had theories as to why.
I think you're talking about Alex Berger, the creator.
It wasn't Alex. It was some wacko on the internet. But boy, he was dead on. He was like, he knew exactly what he was talking about.
Well, one weird thing that happened to me. This is slightly related. When Brian, my old writing partner, and I took over Fuller House in the last couple of seasons, it was right before the final season, and it was after Lori Loughlin had her legal issues with Varsity Blues. On April Fool's Day, there was this article in some like Deseret News or something where someone did it was a fake interview with me, but it seemed like it was real. And the reasonings that they were talking about getting rid of Lori's character and what would happen after, she was divorced from Uncle Jesse on Fuller House, it was so well thought out that I thought it had to be written by also someone in the room, because they actually knew like specific arguments that specific writers had in getting rid of this person. And then it turns out only if you click at the very bottom did it say April Fool's, and it was all a phony interview with me.
But still, they got it right.
But it was so eerie that it was probably had better reasons to include her or not include her than we did. So there are a lot of fans out there who understand the shows just as well as the writers do.
I think so. I think even on people talk about King of the Hill and they remember episodes. I'm like, I don't remember that one. And then I look it up and go, I worked on it. I don't tell me what happens. Like, I don't remember it, It's very, very important to some of these people. And, they watch it all the time and I haven't watched it in 20 years. But did you
there was a moment when on Wilfred where David Zuckerman, the creator, didn't even know that he had a logic fallacy in the first episode. Do you know the story?
No.
I think he was at Comic-Con and it was about the pilot of Wilfred, where Wilfred is trying to get through the fence and a regular dog would crawl through the fence, but instead Wilfred has an axe.
Right.
And then they said, well, shouldn't I take the axe from Wilfred because it's dangerous? And then David wisely said, no, you can't grab the axe because that means the axe is real. And the second he said that, someone in the audience held their hand up and said, well, what about the bomb?
Yeah, what about the bomb? Yeah.
And David had never considered that.
Well, but
Sure, that was fascinating that they had never thought of it on set, but
that
some
show
out there got him instantly.
That show gave me a headache to write. I mean, we're like, what?
Yeah.
and then your partner Brian's like, I think the dog.
That anecdote gave me a headache to mention. So
Yeah,
that out.
It was. I remember he just like, don't you think people just want to see the dog dance?
Yeah.
The dog dance. That was his pitch. Oh man! Oh my God! What a show! But did you ever go?
This whole section is even inside Wilfred.
Yeah, this is inside Wilfred.
I don't think anyone would appreciate that.
But did you ever, even when you were running Fuller House, did you ever turn to what do the fans want? Did you turn to because there's a lot of pressure on that.
Actually, I have to say, that was a huge part of Fuller House, and it was one of the things I think that the audience loved, and it was a unique situation for me because I had still to this day I've seen 2.5 episodes of the original Full House.
Uh-huh.
So I didn't know anything about Full House, but other people did. And so if we would want to throw in, we call them Easter eggs,
right.
Throw in little Easter eggs and bring back, some character that was in a single episode 30 years ago, we would bring those actors back and the audience would go bananas.
Yeah, but how came you didn't watch any old episodes or, there's so much.
Why didn't I? Or
yeah, why didn't you?
Well, part of it is I didn't want to actually be beholden to any of the old stories.
Right.
Because I mean, even, like Fuller House was a little bit of an old fashioned show, but we didn't want to make it just like completely stuck in the past and a show that is only that's referencing the original show. And so I thought it was more helpful to just have a perspective of like, what's it like raising, 3 kids in, modern day California.
But did you feel a strong, I guess, obligation to make sure the fans were happy? Because on most shows, the writers are writing for themselves.
Oh, for sure. We were doing that constantly. And, we knew it. There were certain things that were like, throwing red meat to the audience.
Oh,
kind of like if you're doing the show Fuller House, no matter what the story you're doing is or whatever, if you have to, you bring in a dog wearing sunglasses and the audience goes bananas. And then how do you top it? A baby runs in wearing the same sunglasses.
Mm-hmm.
And then just the audience, like tears of joy in the audience.
Because that was an old staple in the original show, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean that's just the kind of thing that they would stoop to, And so, but it was this. The Fuller House was a show that, like, it really affected me as a writer because it was really that time when every week there were 200 fans in the audience, super fans who knew every single episode of Full House and Fuller House. And so you would get this amazing instant recognition from the audience that you're writing for them.
Right.
Especially when you would have those little Easter eggs. And you don't get that on a lot of shows.
Right.
You know,
right.
like maybe on your Just Shoot Me, you would have Just Shoot Me fans, but every seat every week was a super fan.
No, the weird thing about Just Shoot Me, because we were there the first 4 years, and the first season, probably the first 2 seasons, the audience, they weren't fans, they were hostages. There was people who came for free pizza. You could tell they wouldn't want to be there. And they didn't know the show.
Prisoners.
Yeah, prisoners.
Your sailors in for Fleet Week.
It's basically that. I mean, for people listening, it's like you show up on Hollywood Boulevard and they hand out tickets. Hey, who wants to see a taping of the show? And then anyone would show up and they would stay warm. Anybody's get out of the rain. But
these were people who came from not just around the country, but from literally around the world to see the show.
Yeah.
And they would, these people would center their vacation on coming to the show. And so, it was also amazing to be able to, like, after the show, if you knew who the people were, you would bring them down and they would just get a kick out of walking around the set. Mm-hmm. And that was another kind of highlight every week was, having these people, have this awesome experience that they've grown up with these characters in this set. And then they're running around on the set, now that they're grown up and they've got kids who like the shows.
Now the set was a remake.
That was kind of amazing because it wasn't just fans, it was 2 generations of fans.
Right.
It was like people who are sort of our age and then their kids.
Right.
And so, when network people talk about family co-viewing, it really was that. It was, parents who still love the show.
But it wasn't, the set was a remake, right? It wasn't the actual.
It was a remake, but I'll tell you, and this is also part of the weird experience coming onto the show because neither, I had no appreciation really for Full House at the time. So before the first show, and this was the entire first season before it aired on Netflix, there was a curtain covering the set. And before they would announce the actors, they would lift the curtain like it was like at the theater.
Right.
And the first time for shooting the pilot, when they revealed that to the audience, people burst into tears.
Wow.
Just seeing the set and the couch looking just like it did in the 80s. And the way they really, really mimicked the original set, to the inch, because they had the original plans. It was amazing to see people moved by a set.
Yeah, I bet.
And so that was pretty unusual. And then any line would get, even a mediocre line would get an uproarious laugh from the audience because they've been waiting for 25 years to see this moment.
Now, I imagine you had some of the writers in the show who grew up with watching the original Full House, who knew more about the show than you did.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And that's why also I felt I didn't need to see the original show that much. I'm not recommending people shouldn't do homework.
Now, one of the things that shocked me when we were working with you, this is many years ago, and maybe it was only after season 1 or something, you shocked me when you said that you, at one point, you started as a network executive. I was like, What?
Well, yeah, a studio executive.
Studio. Sorry.
Yeah. I was like a director of comedy development at Universal.
And so tell us what that means. Should
I go back further?
Yeah, go back to where you want to start.
At that point. I mean, I never set out to be a writer. I don't even know if you know any of my origin story about this stuff. I never really set out to be a writer. I always loved TV, but I also loved music and movies, but didn't even know I was going to get into the entertainment business until I was trying to blow a year or two before I would get a little bit of work experience and then go to law school.
You're going to law school.
Get an MBA, and I was never going to be a part of the entertainment industry. But I just lucked into what turned out to be a great job in the mailroom at United Talent Agency, UTA. Okay. And it was like this moment that UTA was on the rise. And I was in the mailroom where I'm literally working 80 hours a week, delivering mail and reading scripts for free and writing coverage, doing that for 5 months. Then I got on a desk. I worked for Nancy Jones and Jay Suras.
Oh boy.
I was their first assistants at United Talent, I believe. And then I knew it wasn't for me because it was really cutthroat.
Yes.
I was learning what I didn't want to do and working in a traditional office. That led to I got a job in development. I worked at Aaron Spelling Productions, and then that job got me.
Wait, but how did you get a job in development? Because it is hard to make the transition from being an assistant at a desk to having a non-assistant job anywhere.
I was still an assistant for 2 years. I was an assistant for spelling for 1 year. Mm-hmm. Then I was an assistant. I worked for Jamie Tarses at NBC.
Right.
And that was kind of the pivotal moment in my career. Because kind of anyone who was Jamie Tarses's assistant moved on to become the next executive. And right. So that kind of became my path. I never set out to do this, but I just kept getting a job that was just better than the last one. Mm-hmm. So I never had the reason to go back to law school. And right. It was just like they kept on dragging me back in with a slightly better job. So this 1 year I spent as Jamie's assistant at NBC, Frasier had been bought but not shot. And then Jamie bought Friends that year. I can't remember the names of the other shows, but like, being on set at the pilot of Friends was really that pivotal moment for me, where I thought, this is, really what I want to do. Like, and I was on the path to be an executive, but I really would look over and the writers seemed to be having a lot more fun. And that's where I didn't really even know it, but that was my path to being a writer, was just kind of hanging out at NBC and seeing how things, being a part
even of it. When you were a development exec, were you thinking, I want to be a writer? Or were you thinking,
not really? I knew like the executive path was fine. And I did that. And on the executive path, when you're no longer an assistant, you get bumped up and you get the office. And it was very kind of, there were a lot of fancy trappings. I would wear a suit and I'd drive around all the networks trying to sell half-hour comedies to the networks. And it was a good job, but there was just something, I still kept on looking at, the writers who were on the floor and thought they were having more fun.
But you were giving notes to writers as
yes.
an executive. Do you at any point feel like I don't really, who might I be giving notes to a writer when they?
I felt that all the time. And because I felt that, because I kind of had so much respect for what the writers did, that it was hard for me to give as many notes, because I thought the writer probably already had thought these things through. But
where were you getting your notes from then?
What's that?
Where were you getting your notes from? Where were you getting your opinions from?
Well, I have opinions just like
I wouldn't have when I was starting out. I go, I don't know, it looks fun to me.
I mean, you're sort of clued in to what your boss likes. Mm-hmm. You also have your own tastes. You kind of know what the project is supposed to be. I don't know. There's no formal executive school on how to give notes. That's why it's kind of a weird job, because there's no training for it. I don't really necessarily know what makes you good or not good.
And a lot of it is just opinion, but I sometimes you'll get the same notes, which are fair, which is start the story sooner, whatever. That's a great note. It's a totally valid note. But sometimes, I've been in meetings and you get a note, and you're like, but that's just your opinion. This doesn't make it better or worse.
Yes, and I mean, obviously, that's something you will struggle with till the end of time. Yeah. But I also always go back to, I think there's a cartoon about this at some point, but like if Shakespeare handed in Hamlet, his agent would give him notes.
Yeah.
And he would say Hamlet is inactive.
Yeah.
And then you would make him a swashbuckling hero.
Yeah. Right. Yes.
And that would ruin Hamlet. So like, you know, and the problem is that like that agent's note would be a well guided note.
Yeah.
Like
Hamlet's
that
Mm-hmm.
is a valid thing for him to say, but it also ruins the inherent art of the piece.
Yeah.
You know?
Ain't that a kick? But then,
not that writing Glenn Martin was the equivalent of Shakespeare,
in many ways,
but it was pretty close.
It was a little higher. But we had some fun on that show. But and then when you wanted to make the transition, I don't know, how did you do that?
So and once like, and this is just my case, it was shockingly not that hard. Who became my writing partner was one of my best friends from college, and Brian had always wanted to be a sitcom writer, and just kind of flamed out a couple of times. And then he was living in San Francisco and having a really excellent career as an advertising copywriter. And I called him up and I told him I wanted to write a sitcom with him, and he said no. And then a week or two later, he changed his mind.
Why did he say no?
Because I said, fine, if you don't write it with me, I'm going to write it with Sue Nagel.
Oh, funny.
That's a true story.
Sue Sue Nagel, who later went on to run HBO and then Annapurna, and you know, she's a big show. But at the time she was
not yet an agent, or she was a very young one, but
she didn't want to write, did she?
So then we got together and to go to a coffee place to brainstorm, and we didn't even make it to the coffee place before we got into a huge argument.
Over what?
Oh, I don't remember.
This partnership's not going well.
No, it was not. But if you can't make it to the place where you're supposed to think, then it's probably a doomed partnership. So anyway, Brian said yes. And then so over the phone we wrote a spec news radio back when people still did that. And news radio had just been on the air. So we wanted to write a show that we loved, and also that there weren't a ton of samples of other specs like that. Right. So we wrote this news radio early on, and I gave it to Sue Nagel. She liked it. She gave it to Michael Whitehorn at Ned and Stacy, and we had one meeting. Brian flew in from San Francisco. I showed up in my suit from being an executive. I had to sneak out from Universal and not tell him where I was going.
Did Michael Whitehorn know you were an executive at the time?
Yes,
he did. Yeah. He didn't think
but that was actually kind of a good thing, because Brian was an ad executive, and Ned of Ned and Stacy was an ad executive, and then also because I had, funny corporate stories, I think Michael liked that as well. And the fact he gets two people for a staff writer's salary.
Were you afraid to leave your cushy job?
Less so than Brian. If I flamed out, I could always go back to being an executive, and that would be fine.
Right.
And in hindsight, that probably would have been the best thing that happened.
Everyone. But yeah, I mean,
I wouldn't be here talking to you. I'd be living in Bermuda by now.
Oh well, live and learn.
Yes. But unfortunately, I made it through that year, and then made it through the next 25 years. And so that was my path, and it kind of happened really fast. So then Michael hired us after that meeting, and then I had to go tell my boss at Universal that not only was I looking for a job, but I had one, and it was as a writer.
Yeah.
And so their business affairs made this big stink that they owned my half of my spec script.
And what are they planning on doing with it?
I asked them that, and I think they were all going to take my spot in the writer's room.
Yeah. They own your half of a worthless spec script that just got you a job. I mean,
I don't know.
value in
It was a weird thing, but
it.
business affairs won't hesitate to
Sink a deal whenever possible.
yes.
We remove the joy out of a writer. We have a 3-hour phone call to figure this out.
they effectively did steal my joy of that moment.
Oh my God. And then then the rest was just one show after another, basically.
And then it started out we got in at the time. There used to be the WB and UPN, the Paramount Network. I think like in that time period, this is like 97, 98, that was like the peak of the sitcom. I think there were over 60 half-hour sitcoms on the air. And then Brian and I rode that roller coaster.
Hey, it's Michael Jamin. If you like my videos and you want me to email them to you for free, join my watch list. Every Friday, I send out my top 3 videos. These are for writers, actors, creative types. You can unsubscribe whenever you want. I'm not going to spam you, and it's absolutely free. Just go to michaeljamin.com/watchlist.
So tell me about developing your last project.
Okay, so the last project that I just developed, I sold it to ABC with 20th. Came to me because it was so personal to what I'm going through as a dad. My youngest kid is non-binary.
Okay.
And she was born a girl, Vivian, and then around the time she was about the 2nd grade, she came to us and said that she felt that she was a boy.
Right.
And so that led us down on this journey, finding out, like having a trans kid and non-binary kid and never knowing anything about it.
Right.
And that kind of led me to want to write about it after I broke up with my writing partner right at the start of COVID. And I was going to have to write my first thing. So I was going to write, at first I was actually going to develop step by step based on the same concept. I was unable to sell that to HBO Max. So instead I redeveloped the idea of me being this like hapless dad, sort of middle class, working class guy in rural Wisconsin, which is where my mom's family is from. And then having this tomboy kid that he just loves more than anything, his Maisie all of a sudden informs him that no, she's now Hunter.
And you were thinking this as a single camera comedy or what?
This was a single camera comedy. Yeah. I mean, it was structured like a multicam, but really, that was that was my spec. And what that led me to do is it got me the attention of other people who were in the non-binary trans world. So then ultimately I partnered, just through meeting lots of people, this woman named Billy Lee, who some people know because Billy Lee was on early seasons of Vanderpump Rules.
Okay.
And so it's kind of a well-known person in the trans community. And then so Billy Lee and her friend Priscilla had this idea about her own life, which is kind of almost too hard to believe is true. Billy Lee grew up in rural Indiana as a boy, left home at 18, found out that he wasn't gay, he was actually a she. Right. And went through the surgeries and then, a lot of turmoil, but then returns back home and fell in love with her best male friend from junior high. And now they're together as an on and off couple. And so it was, how do I take that and turn that into a half-hour comedy? I know it's a long wind up, but it's a great story.
That is almost hard to believe.
Yeah. And
with her best friend growing up.
Yes. And so we pitched it really as a Netflix, HBO, Showtime show that would show that magic relationship and also have sex and, you know, things that I think would be hard, you know, relatively hard for a, you know, a regular network audience.
And it's sold.
But it sold to ABC because they wanted, there's this great, her relationship with her father is also really what it's about.
Right.
And it is also a family show about how it took a trans woman to fix this broken Midwestern family.
Right.
And it's right in ABC's wheelhouse.
And
you
so
know,
where is that now?
like a Connors, but with a strong trans element.
And where is that right now?
It's dead.
Oh. What with every other pilot? Yeah.
Yeah. I can't entirely blame them. Like it would be very amazing to see ABC put on a show about a trans woman and not have it be one of the peripheral characters.
Yeah.
I think that's just a hard sell. Maybe if I was, you know, a more powerful writer, could you jam that down their throat? But I don't think, I think the subject matter was exactly their wheelhouse, but also maybe too on the bleeding edge for them.
It feels a little like, somebody somewhere, that HBO show. I love that show.
No.
Oh yeah, it's a little similar. It's not trans, but it's similar. That I don't know. That just reminded me of it. It's great. It's a great show. Our friend Rob Cohen directs a bunch of those.
Oh
yeah.
Oh, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, great show. But so then what else? Like I mean, it's been a while since Fuller House, but what was that like? I always ask this, what's it like working with the because a lot has changed since you and I broke in. What is it like working on with like the new generation of writers?
Well, luckily at Fuller House, I was still the new generation of writers.
It wasn't that long ago.
I still felt young on the show because we had people. No, we had people who were older and and were around
the original show.
And so it was kind of great to feel like I was on the young side for once.
Yeah.
But I understand what you're getting to. Like in terms of how the room has changed from when it started to now,
even in terms of preparation, because you can answer any way you want, but basically there was more when we were coming up. You were on a show for longer. There were more senior writers, and you were constantly learning, and you were never like thrown into the hot water yet. But now I feel like these kids come in, and there's no really training ground. There's even I think there's an article a couple of days ago. There's no mentorship anymore because
no, there isn't, and that's too sad. I think content in general is as good as it's ever been, and yet that training system doesn't seem to exist, and I wish it did. When we first got in around the Ned and Stacey era, like there still was that. You would still feel that like a showrunner would take someone under his wing, like Michael Whitehorn did with David Litt, and shepherd that person, because they would have multiple years of Ned and Stacey, and then luckily that turned into King of Queens, and so
there were schools.
Michael were together for a long time. That's the old model. I don't see that anymore. I wish it was there. Because to be honest with you, like when Brian and I made the jump from co-executive producers of Fuller House to executive producers, it was like we are being thrown to the wolves after 25 years.
Yes.
Because of jumping from show to show to show, like younger writers do now all the time. I didn't learn those skills. And so we didn't really know that much about editing, sweetening, like how's our camera coverage,
right?
All of those little things that I had to learn them very, very quickly. And so luckily I had a great crew that all wanted to help us, learn as well. But yeah, there is no system. I wish there was.
Like, I even think, like, multi-cameras, like, you back in the day, you'd come out of a school. Like, basically, on Just Shoot Me, we kind of came out of the Fraser school, because Levitan came out of Fraser, which came out of the Cheers school. And it was like that kind of pedigree that you had. And you're just learning from all those people. And then now, like, there's so few multi-cams. Like, if they were to bring back multi-cams, well, who's going to do it? Who knows how to do it? Because it's different than doing a single camera.
It's funny. It's funny you say that, because that's why I'm calling onto the business. That I'm hoping that we can stick around long enough that it will come back at some point. I love the format. Like, I mean, that's one of the things that like really spoiled me about Fuller House is, I was able to be there for like 5 years. And I never really had to worry about, job security, and it was this amazing place, and there were fans of the show, and it was just great to write for them. And so that spoiled me, now that kind of, has gone away, now that Fuller House is no longer on the air. Friday night was my drug, because, Friday night, I love putting on a show every week, and I miss that.
Here's my pitch. Fullest House. Pay me.
That's a great idea. I wonder if anyone pitched that to me before the day I started.
I wonder if anybody pitched that to me. Your shitty joke.
Yeah. So, was it one of my low IQ children?
Well, then. So then, what do you do? So what do you do now? I mean, you're developing and
so now I'm working on a new multi-camera idea. I'm very excited about.
And go on. Have you taken it out yet?
Yeah. No, I'm just. I think I finally have. I have the pilot story. I'm just trying to populate it with all the other things.
Okay, and then
with all the other characters, because. I basically started with the central character. It's kind of high concept. I don't want to give it away. I'll talk to you off camera about it. With the central character, and then that led to a bigger world. And then now I have to populate that world. Kind of how I want to fit tonally into that world. Like it's an idea that to me, it feels a little in the vein of What We Do in the Shadows.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
In terms of a high concept comedy idea. Because I never worked for him, but like my hero as a sitcom writer is Paul Simms.
Okay.
And my first spec was Ned and Stacy. I was News Radio.
Yeah.
And which was run by Paul Simms, created by Paul Simms, and now he runs, What We Do in the Shadows, which I just think is a brilliant show.
So then, what advice do you have for people? Do you have any advice for people trying to get into the business now?
That's why I'm here. I thought I was seeking advice from you.
Yeah, you thought you were still there's a job with you.
I thought people were gonna call in and tell me what to do with my life.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the number one thing is, like, if you want to be a writer, I think you probably have to move to LA, maybe New York. But if you want to be in TV comedy, I think you have to be in LA.
Yeah.
That's the first thing you have to do is move here. And then write all you can. Write things that make you laugh, that amuse you, because no one else will probably enjoy it, so you might as well. and also I think you have to get creative. I think social media is a great way to get noticed. My wife happens to be an executive on the TV side, and she bought the Twitter feed Shit My Dad Says when she was a while,
and that was got to be 10 years ago now.
And yes, and I think that was like the first thing that a network executive or a network has like bought something on. Like, no one was buying a Twitter feed at the time. And I thought that was pretty clever, that Wendy started looking at things like that. And I think that's a great place to get noticed,
Yeah, I agree.
especially for young comedy writers.
Does she still do that? Does she still actively, does she look on social media for people like that?
She does that. She also, she flips through, they get proposals of books that are coming out, not even books that have been written, but just titles of book proposals sometimes.
Really?
And she has scanned through that and bought a series based on one of the blurbs that she read about.
I've never heard that.
That was actually the show Suburgatory.
Okay, because that's a good title.
It's a
I've never
great
heard that
title.
before. So I've always, because my advice to begin people is, well, it's got to be a best-selling book. But you're saying,
I'm not suggesting that's a way to get noticed.
right?
To write a book, although it's not a bad idea. If you have a great life story, write a book or put it on TikTok.
Right.
I think just if you have a comic voice, there are a million ways to get it out there.
Yeah.
My dear friend, a guy named David Arnold, was a writer on Fuller House and just started showing, doing TikTok videos of him and his wife and kids. And then I think Ellen DeGeneres was the first to share one of his videos, and then that blew up for him. And then he was getting sponsored, and he was a stand-up comic, and it was helping out with his stand-up business.
Yeah.
And so at the age of 53, he was discovered on new media, and
what would it become of
little tiny sketches about his family.
Oh, so let's talk about Kirsty, which was you were, to me, that was a lot of fun. So that was the Kirstie Alley show. And
Yeah.
you guys brought us in. They needed a freelance. I don't know why but they wanted to have somebody freelance, even though you got a great writing staff. And we're like, we'll do it. And then
I think your agent said that your teeth were falling out, and if you didn't write a script for the medical.
Oh, not at all. Honestly, that show, because that was a bunch of heavy hitters on that show.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed it. We only sat in for a couple of days. We walked in, and then you guys said, "Okay, here's the story." We broke it, kind of. Go write it. We're like, okay, and but it was
to star Ted Danson.
Yeah, and then Marco punted it for the next season, thinking there was going to be a season 2. Marco, there's no season 2. You don't punt that. You shoot it today before they pull the plug.
The old we'll use script season 2.
Yeah, the old season 2 trick.
I don't know if that was him being tricked or you being tricked.
Honestly, we had a great time.
It was a great script. It was
It was fun. It was just fun sitting in with a bunch of people.
Yeah.
Well, a bunch of writers that I respected. So
no, that was an amazing experience. We like Cloris Leachman did the show, like some really, we wrote an episode for John Travolta.
Yeah, it was Michael Richards and Rhea Perlman, and it was like, these are good, these are heavy hitters, these are great actors. So
the night that Cloris Leachman did the show, we went out for drinks afterwards with her, and I ended up sitting next to Kirstie Alley's assistant, and it wasn't until about 10 minutes into my conversation when she mentioned reincarnation that I realized that I was talking to a high-level Scientologist, and then I noticed she was doing all these Scientology tricks with me, like deeply staring into my eyes and not blinking until I blink. It was very bizarre.
Wow. I think we can keep
that's a good enough reason to become a sitcom writer, is to have someone do Scientology mind tricks on you.
Those are always good stories when can you go hang out with the cast, hang out, yeah. And then what about
when Cloris Leachman is far from the craziest person at the table?
She was pretty wild, yeah.
Yeah.
Did I ever work? I'm trying to remember if I ever worked with her on something. I think I did, but I can't remember what it was.
Got to be just shoot me.
It might have been. I don't remember. But okay. Well, let's get to what everyone wants to talk about. Baby Bob.
Oh,
Let's go.
You save the best for last.
Let's save the best for last. Let's talk about Baby.
Well, I believe that Baby Bob was the highest rated show that I've ever been on.
But they canceled it so fast.
They canceled it, yes. I think that was a disconnect where the high ups, meaning like Les Moonves when he was running CBS, I think he wanted Baby Bob to be on the air. And so that he developed it like 2 or 3 times with multiple casts.
Right. We got to have a talking baby.
And it was, but the talking baby always stayed the same based on these commercials. Was it Geico?
Yes.
I think it was Geico commercials with Baby Bob interviewing Shaq. It's the concept that got everyone all hot and bothered. And so Les Moonves bought the show. This is my version of the story. I'm sure it's only partially accurate. But he didn't really include the lower level executives who absolutely hated the show. And so as Brian and I got hired on the show, we thought, hey, it's a CBS show. They must like the show. But the reaction from the executives after every table read was basically, how dare you?
How dare you have the baby talk? How dare you what?
Like just everything about the show seemed to offend the CBS executives who were in charge of the show.
Were there any of the advertising guys in it? Were they involved at all?
No, I don't think so. Kenny Campbell was the voice and mouth of the baby. And then actually I didn't know much about babies when I was on the show, but then now when I look back, I realize how creepy it is that a baby has a full set of adult teeth.
Yeah.
That are prominent. If I saw a baby like that in real life, I would run.
Do you think that was the problem with the show? The size of the baby's teeth?
Well, the Mike Saltzman, my dear friend who created the show, described it as Frasier, and they happen to have a talking baby.
Frasier had
Frasier,
all right,
and they just happen to have a talking baby. Yes. That was Mike's.
And was it like, what were the writers do? Yeah.
I don't have a lot of memories.
Okay.
So there were a lot of late nights, and one night, I think it was about midnight, that I got into a shouting match with one of the other writers about whether or not Baby Bob was a genius.
Right.
And the other writer was taking the stance of, he's not a genius. He's only talking at 6 months. Mozart was writing symphonies at 5 or 7. And I was shouting and I was yelling about the other side that Mozart was not talking at 6 months.
And was everyone looking at you're both out of your minds?
Yes. It's like, it's midnight. Can I go home?
Go home. How do we get the baby to dance? That's all.
But I mean, part of the lesson there is, even a show that you think is so simple or terrible that you could write it in your sleep, it's not that way.
No,
because even a show like that is very hard to write.
Yes.
Because you have so many layers of people to please.
Yes, people ask me, is a great show harder to write than a bad show? And no, they're all kind of hard to write for different reasons.
Yeah. And that was, I mean, definitely a lesson. And then another lesson was, despite what we felt like, it is sort of embarrassing to be on a show like Baby Bob when you're on the Paramount lot and then the Frasier golf cart drives by and you're in the same business, but you're not in the same business. But when it came to the ratings, Baby Bob did huge in the ratings.
Yeah.
And it was like one of the top, I think it's one of the top new comedies that year.
And that's so interesting. And that's the thing people don't realize as well, is that you may be a great writer, but if you're in this lane, it's hard to get out of that lane because that's how people see you. And
Yes.
if you're in a great, even if you're even a bad writer on a great show, now you're in that lane. You're in a great, you're inflated. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, people don't quite realize that.
Yeah.
And you got to take the job you got to get. You take the job you get. So
and you really don't know if it's going to pan out.
no.
Like I remember talking to Al Jean and Mike Reese when we worked with them and asking them when they got started. They started on the Simpsons. I think coming off of Gary Shandling's show, and when they were pitched coming on to do this cartoon on Fox,
Right.
they thought it was not good for their career.
This would kill their career. And now it would make no difference. Honestly, now you take a job, whatever job you can get, you take the job.
Yeah.
But back then you could make decisions, you could make choices.
Yes. Yeah. And interestingly, like back when Brian and I were making lists of shows we would want to be on, Simpsons was like a C-level list at the time.
Really?
We liked it, but we thought it was imminently. No one still knew it was going to be on the air
40 years later. Yeah.
And because being on the Simpsons, I think it was like uncool, then it became cool, then it was uncool.
Well, in a way, it's a little bit of, it's almost golden handcuffs if you're on the show. If you're on the Simpsons now, you're not going to leave because it's job security, and get ready for writing Bart jokes for the rest of your career.
Yeah. But the crazy thing is that there are writers who are still there, who were there when I was in the mailroom at United Talent.
Sure. Yeah.
So there are people
they've made a career at it.
Yes. So I was on the business side of the business. I became an executive, and then I was a writer for 25 years. Yeah. And they're still doing the job from the day I got into the business.
It's so interesting. It's just so and I would think creatively it's hard, but the money will make you feel better.
Money makes a lot of things feel better.
It's you crying to your dollar bill. $50 bill. Is there a $50 bill? $100 bill. I wouldn't know what a $50 bill looks like. It's fascinating. Dude, thank you so much. We had a good chat. We had a good chat, Steve.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. This is I don't know. I'm always fascinating in learning people's journeys and how they got there. And so thank you so much for being on my little show.
Thank you. And hopefully you have stuff that you don't have to cut.
Oh, sorry, folks, if you heard the edited version, we had to trash a lot of stuff. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Remember, we got a lot of great stuff for you on my website. You can get on my newsletter. You get my free, all that stuff. Go to michaeljamin.com and find out what we got there. And I got another webinar coming up. All right, everyone. Thanks so much. Until next week, keep writing.
This has been an episode of Screenwriters Need to Hear This with Michael Jamin and Phil Hudson. If you'd like to support this podcast, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing this podcast with someone who needs to hear today's subject. For free daily screenwriting tips, follow Michael on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Michael Jamin Writer. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Phil A. Hudson. This episode was produced by Phil Hudson and edited by Dallas Crane. Until next time, keep writing.